This is For the Better, a podcast for those working to affect change within their team, organization, or community. I'm your host, Ben Cash. Thanks for tuning into the podcast, where we talk with leaders and change-minded people from purpose-driven organizations and discuss the great things they're doing. This podcast is produced by Reason One, a full-service digital agency helping those who do good do better. And my guests today are Vineeta and Tom.
Hey, Ben.
Co-founders of Wholegrain Digital, London's design-led WordPress agency for positive businesses and charities. A few of their clients are Oxfam, UNICEF, and Method. I use Method all the time. I love that stuff. Vineeta heads up their discovery and design services, manages design standards and processes within their team, and ensures they push new boundaries of good design. And Tom is a self-described, it's from your website, sustainability nut, and has been active in the sustainable design scene in the early 2000s or since the 2000s. And he's an author of the book Sustainable Web Design. Has spearheaded initiatives to put sustainability on the agenda of the digital sector, and has been featured in films for the BBC and CNN. Knows his shit. You can learn more about them, their agency, and Tom's book on web sustainability at wholegraindigital.com. So, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So at the beginning there, I purposefully left out your last name. I just said Vineeta and Tom because it's actually one and the same. Greenwood.
It is.
Yes.
You were also, in addition to being the co-founders of Wholegrain Digital and run the business, you were also married. Is that correct?
It is indeed.
Okay. So I have so many things that I'm curious about and want to discuss with you both. Things from web sustainability to being a B Corp to writing a book. I remember reading some things like the carbon footprint of remote teams, living in London. So many things I'm curious about. But if I'm honest, the biggest thing that I'm curious about is how the hell are you partners in business and marriage? Are hard enough to run, and a marriage is a marriage, right? Like, how are you guys doing this? How does this work?
Tom's my best friend.
Aww.
And it's nice to have somebody that you can share positives and difficulties with.
Yeah.
So he knows my strengths and weaknesses, and I know his.
Ooh.
Totally.
That's dangerous. That's dangerous.
So I think that really helps.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And we started the agency because we wanted to work together and spend more time with each other.
Wow.
But overall, it's worked really well. I think just the fact that we really get each other means that, and we have very different personalities and skills, I think means that it actually balances out really nicely. In the early days, and the early days I'm talking about probably the first 10 years plus.
Since 2000.
How long have you been married? How long?
We got married in 2008.
Okay.
And the business started in 2007. So the business came first.
Oh, so what happened if the business flopped? I mean, was the
Well, if we can be business partners, we can get married, is how I look at it.
Okay. So when you guys were exchanging vows a year later after starting this business, were you what was it like, okay, wow, we just started a business, this is going to be a cakewalk. What was it like?
I think if you go slightly further back, we were flatmates first. Then we became best friends. Then we started dating. And then we started a business. And then we got married. So I knew how he doesn't like to do any washing of clothes. And I leave stuff in the sink and, all that stuff.
Okay, so this is not an office romance.
It goes back further than that. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And then we'd started the business together, and the first few years of running business were really hard, but we'd already done that first year of, oh wow, this business thing is really, really tough before we got to the point of actually having our wedding. So we so we knew that okay, we could do tough things together.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that you at least had the wedding website all set, right? That was, so, well, thanks for a light opening here. full disclosure, I've known you guys for a few years now, and it's so bizarre, like to say a few years, because this feels like could be a week, could be 10 years. I have no idea at this point during the pandemic sense of time, but I've known you guys for a little while. Our teams have done some knowledge sharing on sustainability and accessibility, and I've read your book. And what made me so curious to interview you both is that if there's ever anybody with a change mindset, it's you two. And I think what I was really and the irony was I met you guys first, and then your book came out, right? And then I was like,
Yes.
whoa, these guys are legit. Right? Like this is real, right? And so one of the main things I want to talk about with you today, just because it's something I'm curious about as the human that lives on this planet, but also as a business owner of a digital agency that's also trying to put sustainability as as part of what we do. How did you get into this? Like, I did see the manifesto, right? The Sustainable Web Manifesto, which is, I think it's sustainablewebmanifesto.com, if anybody's curious. Like, change often starts with a manifesto, right? So you've got this thing. What's the story leading up to you writing that?
Sure. So if we back up like way back,
okay, do it.
Pre-Wholegrain.
We've already gone to your personal lives here. I expect an entrance at some point here. So go ahead.
Exactly. Pre-Wholegrain, pre-Vineeta. I was really passionate about sustainability and design in the context of like industrial product design, and I wanted to have a career designing like things that would be meaningful and useful to people, but also that wouldn't end up in landfill sites and consume loads of energy and be made of toxic materials and so on. So that was like kind of where I really wanted to take my career. And
this is going to the 90s.
This is going way, way back.
Good. Yeah.
But I had this idea that I wanted to run my own design agency. And by the time, a few years out of university, by the time I got to the point where I potentially could try and start my own company, I'd already sort of got to the point where I was a bit disillusioned with the world of designing physical things, thinking that there might be better ways of designing things that actually just kind of design out the impact. And so digital and also other types of design, like graphic design and brand work and so on, like the non-physical design really appealed to me. And that's why I sort of wanted to make that shift into that world. And so Vineeta and I actually decided we'd start our design agency together, focused on sustainability. And that was sort of the beginning of like, okay, we want to work with clients that are doing something positive in the world. That's like a part of it. We want to try and see if we can run the business in a way that is itself kind of sustainable from an operational point of view. Right. And then sort of basically just use design and technology for good. And that was really the beginning of it. And we didn't really have too much awareness of like
commercial awareness either.
We didn't have much commercial awareness at all. No, I said the first few years were hard. But we got some momentum, and we sort of carved out a niche for ourselves as being like really good at WordPress design and development, and particularly in this kind of space of like purpose-led organizations. And but we didn't really have any awareness of the digital, like the environmental impact of digital technology itself. That was something that was sort of, we were using digital technology, but on the basis that we were avoiding having any environmental impact because we weren't designing physical product.
Sure.
And I think we kind of we were blissfully unaware for the first 10 years. Basically thought, well, this is great. Like
ignorance is bliss. Yeah.
Ignorance is bliss. And that was great. And it was then when we were starting to approach the sort of the 10-year birthday of the business, we were looking to kind of say, well, how do we keep this interesting? How do we challenge ourselves further and actually push ourselves to do even better? And that was when we came across B Corp certification, which is something that I guess people listening might not be familiar with.
Yeah.
But it's basically a rigorous assessment of like social and environmental practices of a business, and it can be a business in any industry, but it's independently assessed by a nonprofit called B Lab, so that you can sort of credibly look somebody in the eye and say we're like really doing well on social and environmental practices. It's not kind of self-certifying.
Right.
So
that would work really well, wouldn't it?
Well, there's an awful lot of that going on. I mean, it's pretty much standard practice.
Yeah, exactly. Just ask the marketing departments, right?
Exactly. That's where it's like sustainability and like social responsibility normally lives in the marketing department.
Yes. No conflict there. No conflict of interest.
Not at all. No. So we basically went into this process as a way of trying to challenge ourselves to learn, like, how well are we doing? Like, we set out to run a sustainable business. Are we living up to that? And get somebody else to verify it. And in that process, one of the things that it asks you to look at is like provide data about the environmental impact of your products. And of course, being a digital agency, we were like, well, we don't have any data. And digital's all about data, but when it comes to the environmental impact of your product, you don't have it.
It's weightless. It's out there in the cloud,
Exactly. It's just virtual. It's not real.
Yeah. We don't produce anything. We don't make anything.
Yeah.
And we were very naive about that, weren't we?
We were very naive about it. And but I asked loads of people that I could find in the industry and spent a lot of time on Google trying to find out, and it seemed like that was pretty much the general opinion. It was like, well, yeah, like there's no environmental impact of websites and digital technology. So we asked B Lab themselves in the certification process, and they said, well, yeah, like for your type of business, you should just skip this whole section. That's pretty standard. They didn't seem to see any issue with it.
So B Lab themselves, it wasn't on their radar.
Wasn't on their radar at all.
Oh, wow.
But
got curious.
Yeah, it got me curious. It didn't feel right somehow. So we went through the B Corp certification process, left that bit blank, got certified. But then one of the big things that came off the back of it was like, we need to research this. We need to find some real information. And that's really kind of where this whole journey began, of finding out what the impact is and getting and we did find a few other people in the industry who actually were looking at this. And that's where the Sustainable Web Manifesto came from, is we got together with those people and said, okay, well, what are the core principles that we should all be thinking about when we're doing web projects from an environmental point of view?
If you had to define web sustainability for someone who does not know or is not familiar with it, what would it be? What's the nutshell?
Sure. So I'd say, from a pure environmental point of view, web sustainability is designing and building and operating digital services in a way that minimizes their environmental impact. And that's mostly energy and carbon emissions.
Brass tacks, how does it play out?
Sure. So essentially, any digital service, doesn't matter whether it's a website, an app, some sort of streaming service, a video, like online video game, whatever it is, it's using energy in three main places. In the data centers, which is like the big warehouses full of computers, where all of this live, the internet lives basically in these data centers around the world. Then the transmission networks, so like between you in your home or wherever you are out and about on your mobile device, like the data, the information has to get from the data center to you and back again. So there's all this electricity being used.
Oh yeah, everything.
Yeah. Exactly. So like the broadband networks, the mobile networks are all using electricity to transmit the data. And then there's the actual, like the end user device. So in your home or your office or wherever you are, you're sitting on a laptop, or you're using your smartphone, or you're watching your smart TV. And then you've got your like networking equipment in the building as well, which is all using electricity. So the sort of the data center, the transmission networks, and the end user devices are basically of operation, basically the three main areas where the
Yeah.
electricity's.
And for people who don't know about this, put it in context. I know that, like one of the things I remember in the manifesto was it talked about maybe this, you might get this more correctly than I am. If the internet were a country, it would be the sixth or seventh largest
polluter.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
polluter. Yeah.
So when you take all of it globally, all the data centers, the transmission networks, all of the devices that are billions of connected devices, and add them up, then you're talking about roughly the same amount of electricity used every year as the United Kingdom.
Wow.
And the United Kingdom it might be a small country, but it's
We use a lot of
it's a,
energy.
it's a big economy that consumes a lot
Oh
of
my
energy.
gosh.
So-
That's just, it's mind blowing when you try to wrap your head around it, right? Because you just think, oh, I'm just, pull up my phone, I'm just pulling this thing up, and you don't think about what's behind it, and the things that you set in motion by, getting getting a burger delivered to your home, right?
Or just watching a YouTube video for a recipe, or just
Exactly.
watching a song of your favorite, you're listening to your favorite song on Spotify or whatever that might be.
That's it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, just the data centers are sort of something that's really out of sight and out of mind of most people who use the internet. There's thousands of data centers around the world, but an individual data center uses, roughly the same amount of electricity as like a medium-sized town. And yet it's an anonymous warehouse on an industrial estate somewhere that you'll never even notice. You might drive past it, but they don't have like big logos on the outside. It doesn't say like Amazon data center. They're all intentionally
sucking energy
anonymous.
right here. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, the amount of water they use to cool themselves down, and the fact that the society has used the word cloud makes it sound virtual, and the word cloud makes it look like it's floating away. It's not floating away.
Well, and the fact that the fact that you, both of you, for 10 years also felt like this is out there nowhere, and that B Lab was like, oh no, just leave it blank, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yes,
like we're in the middle of the B Corp process, and the number of questions that we get asked, and the documentation, and like it's hardcore. And if they left this out, and you guys didn't know for 10 years, and you really care about this, like, how is anyone else supposed to know, right? Like, do you feel like you're ever screaming into the void on this?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
Quite
I mean,
often,
especially when we first came across this topic, it definitely felt like we were screaming into the void. And I guess that's why we've spent the last few years kind of going out of our way to
make it our mission to educate and talk about it as loudly as we could. And as many people as we could, and not make it our USP, but talk to others so that they could include it in their processes. But because climate change mitigation is not going to happen just by Tom and me switching to renewable energy. It's going to be the whole.
Oh, come on. You guys are charming. You're so charming and so smart. And I know that just the two of you, you can make this happen.
Absolutely.
Chin up.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I'm another, middle-aged white dude on Twitter. And I see a lot of tweets and chatter and things about NFTs and Web3 and all these things and blockchain and crypto and all this stuff, and it's there's so many people so passionate about it, right? And this sort of new world that's getting created, and DAOs and everything. And one of the threads that I often see is about how blockchain and this new sort of virtual sort of world that's being created really uses a lot more energy. And that blockchain, while it's like to document these non-fungible tokens and all these various things and stuff that other people understand a lot better than I do, and you probably understand, can enlighten us a little bit on this. But like, how does that stuff impact this? Because right now we're talking about websites, right? And there's sort of 3 points, but this is, from what I can see, and what I know so far, this is going to dwarf the internet. I mean, this is
Yeah.
huge. Like,
absolutely. So, I mean, I sort of started joking recently that like websites are like the internet from the olden days.
yeah,
And
bless its
I
heart.
shouldn't say that because I run a web design agency, but
Yeah.
you know, but
We'll all be out of business in a couple of years. It's okay.
18 months, stop.
Yeah.
But you know, the actual, you know, the amount of data used by websites and kind of what I would call sort of traditional web services
Right.
was like the majority of data consumption probably until like relatively recently. And now you've got like, you know, all the video streaming services, and you've got well, like various forms of AI, and now like the people are talking about the metaverse, which is like, you know, we're going into 3D.
Multiples. Yeah.
You're all of these things are like exponentially increasing the amount of computer processing required in the data centers and on the end user devices, and therefore the amount of electricity consumed, as well as sort of exponentially multiplying the amount of data that has to be transferred over the network. So there's this conflict between the improving efficiency of technology and the hardware of computing. Like, we all know that like computers get faster and more energy efficient over time. So you buy the latest version and it always has longer battery life.
Sure.
It's much faster than the old one. But there's this sort of, but we're also all familiar with the idea of feature creep, where like gradually your device slows down and it like can't run the new software properly. And especially if you're a Windows user, you know that like the new version of Windows is really going to slow your computer down.
Among other things.
Among other things, yeah. So, but this is happening on like a much bigger scale in terms of the new internet technologies. So yes, like data centers are becoming much more efficient, and the computers in them becoming much more powerful. The telecoms networks are becoming much faster and more efficient, and then the devices that we're all using are becoming faster and more efficient. But actually, the amount of data that we're using is accelerating faster than those efficiency gains. So we're eroding all of
We're becoming more wasteful in our practices because we have extra bandwidth available, or we are on Wi-Fi. We don't care about the size of the website because it loads quickly anyway, which means you have more data coming through. So all of those efficiencies gained through the optimization of networks and the devices is lost because people aren't coding as efficiently as they could.
The clown car may be bigger, but they're putting more clowns in it. Yeah,
exactly.
It's a good analogy.
Yeah. So that's a, you know, sort of defined at a high level, that a pretty big problem, right? And what are some things that I guess in your business, if we sort of maybe bring this into a little more narrow, what are some things that you're doing in your business and the websites that you make and the choices that you make that move us in the opposite direction, that help change this trend? And, you know, can you give me just a couple examples to put it in context?
Sure. Thinking about how people are coming to your website, who is coming to your website, and therefore optimizing your website to have only the users that actually are going to convert. For example, we go through a process of discovery with our clients to understand who their users are. And I think it sounds pretty standard when you say, oh, we do a user research and user discovery in terms of user personas, user journeys. But why that is important is because when the person comes to your website, you want to reduce the amount of time that they are wasting, because all that waste is going to convert to energy usage. And that's what we're reducing by optimizing our user journeys, optimizing how they are absorbing the knowledge along the way. How are you making that experience joyful? So that's the discovery part of the process, which helps get from A to B quickly, efficiently. But then in the design practices, we are practicing less is more. So everything that we design, we're trying to do with the least amount of elements. And then that converts nicely into the coding element, which is the less amount of things you code. The best code is no code at all. But you're trying to write the least, which means you have to process the least. So it might sound like, oh, this project could have been 3 times the price, but well, we did it in a third of the cost and your client was happy, they'll come back and spend some more. So it's about thinking about the future. Anything that we build is going to be impacting for years to come.
Right.
Is the thought process that goes into anything that we do, rather than thinking about, oh, you know what, this would be so fancy to put these extra animations and make it look all pretty. And you can make things look pretty with low code, with more efficient code.
Right.
But it's about thinking through the whole life cycle of the product. Is that product actually going to perform how you want it to perform? And that's where the design processes, development processes link up with that discovery. So it's not just for the users, but also for the whole world.
Yeah. What's so interesting about it, and when I read your book, this really sunk in, was that it seems more about it forces you to be intentional and to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Right? Is this video or this large piece of wow factor, right, that clients often want, is this ultimately going to accomplish the end goal? Will the end user be more engaged? Will they take that action? Will they sign up? Will they donate, etc., because of this thing?
Yeah.
And if you can't answer that, or the answer is no, then who is it for? Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as the internet gets faster, I think web designers are kind of the most guilty of basically getting
carried away.
We've never wanted to do some wow factor or win an award or make something cool. We don't do cool things. We do. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
It's like, well, we can get away with it. We can have more gimmicks because we can, and it's fun. And B, we can also be more lazy because you can get away with not optimizing code, not optimizing images,
using existing libraries that are
just throw the whole of Bootstrap in there because it's quick and easy, and you can get away with it because the internet's getting faster, and you think people won't notice that,
right?
So it's about being really, really mindful about actually caring about all these details and asking, can you justify the existence of every element of the design and every element of the content and every element of the code?
You explain the thing, this problem, and how we can change in a very, very good way. And it's a phenomenal book. So kudos on creating that. I know that's no. I struggle writing emails, for God's sakes, much less a book, right? So thank you for taking the time to put that together in a thoughtful way. So I really would encourage anybody, whether you are, working in a nonprofit, you're, a CMO at a healthcare organization, or you're work at a digital agency, anybody, to read that book and to put all of this in context. So I must admit, I had, and probably still have, a bit of an agency crush on Wholegrain. You guys have built something really, really cool. And I found you guys a while back when we were in the early days of the B Corp application process, because it does take forever. It is very intense. And we're trying to find others who are doing this, and I found yours. And you're like, who are these people in London? And I'm looking at your website. Obviously you do great work, but you also give a shit about people and planet. And when I'm looking at your website, I was really struck that it's not fluffy sort of greenwash copy, but you're taking real measurable actions. You're real tangible things that can show how you are, using your business as a force for good, right? Which is sort of that B Corp mantra. And so I'm curious what that, and I know you talked about that a little bit with how you started that, but on the website at Vineeta, it says that the Wholegrain was your brainchild. What's the story there? Why did you carve out this? Why sustainability? Why WordPress? Why those things? What was it for you? That
WordPress was a CMS that we kept seeing that our clients like, and they could take full control of their site. And as a customer service agency that we pride in giving a good customer service, we thought the less amount of effort we have to put in entering the content or changing something that the client could change was something important to us. And WordPress kept standing out as the best CMS for every site that we put out in WordPress. We won more clients back.
Right.
And that was one of the reasons we went down the WordPress route.
Right.
We used to do a lot of other CMSs as well, right at the beginning. And firstly, they were much more complex to understand, even for us. And if they're complex for us to understand, what hope does the client have who are non-technical people? They can enjoy using Facebook and Word, but once you come into a CMS that's really complex, that puts people off managing their own site. So that was the WordPress element.
Right.
And WordPress was at the beginning of their journey, and we just got on the right train at the right time.
Right.
Is how I feel. Is that fair, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we first decided to specialize in WordPress, which was Vineeta's idea, that what people were still like saying, "Oh, WordPress is just a blogging platform. Like you can't build serious websites with WordPress." There was a real stigma around it back then.
Sure.
It was one of those things that I now regret and I really am proud about. But I called up a few agencies and convinced them to switch to WordPress and said, you need to specialize in WordPress too. A bit like we're doing with sustainability now. So it was a thing that I wanted other agencies to also put their thoughts into, because I knew we needed to make a market for people looking for WordPress websites. And although we were the first ones shouting about it in the UK, there were other people using it, but not specializing in it. And we needed to grow the sector, not just keep it for ourselves. The same thing with sustainability.
Yeah.
You can't grow the sector. You can't expect clients to ask for it unless there's enough competition. They need 3 quotes. They need 5 agencies that they need to go out to.
Right.
And it was something that we pushed for. That's what I meant by sometimes I regret it, but at the same time, because I increased my competitors. But at the same time, it's nice because you can exchange ideas on how to make things better.
Yeah. No, and I think that was what attracted us to collaborating with you guys on sustainability and accessibility and getting our teams together, because it, I think when we are in the early adoption part of the curve, right, bringing people together to sort of to help amplify it and to help help others, help increase awareness, I think is important. And you guys certainly have influenced us greatly in that. And it is it's part of our leadership meetings. It's part of our conversations. We're making investments in that direction. And like you, we want to spread the word as well, right? Because it's, we don't want to just shout into the void, right? And sometimes in running a business, it's hard to be that early adopter and still sign clients and differentiate and provide value in those things when they're not there yet, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
To that end, I'm curious on the B Corp side too. One of the things I was impressed with on your site was, I think it's on your about page or something like that. You've got these specific. You're very specific about the actions you're taking to use your business as a force for good, and that it's more than just amplifying clients' work, which is something that we struggle with as well. We're like, well, our tagline is, we help those who do good do better, right? And at a certain point, we realize, well, that's great and all, but we have 50 odd something people. Like, how do we do this, right? How do we use our team as a force for good in the things that we invest in, the time we spend? And your website, that was one of the things that drew me to you guys, was how well you are at those things.
Some ideas come naturally. And some ideas come through somebody suggesting something. And a lot of ideas come from Tom. I think he's a bit of an ideas generator. I have to put a lid on some of the ideas because financially they're not always viable. Let's just say that. But if you went to
my colleagues' ears are ringing right now. My colleagues' ears are ringing. So, Tom, we're going to put a support group together. Yeah.
If you went to our About page, there's loads of positive actions that we're taking. A few ideas that we have implemented include asking all of our team members at home to switch to renewable energy. That was a 3-year long project, and now everybody is on renewable energy. But it doesn't come easy. Some of these ideas are in inception years ago, and you have to sort of coax people into thinking about it. But then there's
Yeah.
some things that people vote for. For example, all of our food that we order at work or for clients is vegetarian, and it came from the team. So, well, I eat plant-based personally, and I used to normally buy plant-based food and for myself. But when I was buying for clients, there was always this nervousness about how much carbon emissions is my every meal that I'm buying for the clients.
Right.
And we put this question out to the team saying, what would you like us to do about dietary choices? And they, all of them, even the meat eaters, voted vegetarianism, didn't they?
Not everybody, a majority, but yeah.
Well, the voting system was fair.
Is there like burger shaming when someone comes into the office with takeout, or
No, not really.
No.
People just buy their own things and they look
Yeah.
quite happy about it.
Yeah.
Nobody sort of makes anybody feel guilty. But
It's been surprisingly well adopted. I mean,
yeah.
when we just, I mean, the reason we had a vote on that, we don't have a vote on everything in the company, but the reason we had a vote on that one is because we knew that food choices can be a very sensitive issue.
Right.
And we thought, if we're going to have a policy that says that we're going to limit what we buy as a company for like catering events and meetings and all of these sorts of things,
Christmas dinners and
like team meals, like if you're going to expense food when you're out traveling, going here and there visiting clients and so on,
Right.
that could like really piss some people off, right? If you
Yeah, well, that's a great point, and I am curious because this is something that we think a lot about, right? If our mission and vision are charting a certain course, not everyone's going to be on board with that, and obviously fundamentally you need to have like people who can do their job. They can create the widgets and do the things, right? And so they're not. It's not that they're not rowing they're not in the boat with you, but they might not be rowing as hard in that direction. And so I'm curious how over time how your perspective on that has changed about how hard do people need to be on board with your vision to be successful at Wholegrain?
you have to separate out their personal life and the vision for the company. The vision for the company is to create a better web for the better world. And the personal mission to grow yourself and become a better person is your personal choice. Just because they are not rowing as fast in the personal direction doesn't mean they're not aligned with the company's mission.
Right.
So they have to be really aligned with the mission of the company for us. They have to really be, they shouldn't be climate change deniers. They should.
Okay. Yeah. Probably a good start there.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are some
Table
things
stakes.
they have to. Yeah.
I think there's a really important balance to be struck between wanting kind of cognitive diversity of people with different ideas and different opinions.
Yeah.
There's like real inherent value to that, but then at the same time, you do need to be rowing in the same direction and not like in completely different boats, like sailing to different places. Like
Right.
So it's really important to us that anybody who joins the team fundamentally gets what we're about. And they think that's something that they want to be a part of. But then beyond that, I think the finer details are then, should all be up for debate around exactly how do we get there? Like what's our rowing technique?
Well, how does that affect your hiring process when you're looking for new people to bring on? Because I know that sometimes you might set a new vision. You got some people who've been in the boat with you for a while, right? But then you're getting new people on the boat. And how does it affect your hiring process?
Our people manager, Kiara, does the cultural context interview before we do anything else. So she would ask questions related to what sort of lifestyle they have, what sort of interests they have. And it sort of reveals a lot about a person in terms of what their life's mission is. Are they actually looking to better themselves? Because at Wholegrain, it's really important for us to be hiring people who are hungry to make themselves better, not just professionally, but personally as well. It's only when you are keen to improve yourself that you'll be supportive towards somebody else's improvement.
Yeah.
So we really need to see that passion. It doesn't matter if they want to just go and clean the streets or pick up plastic from the ocean or want to make better websites. There should be something about them that it sort of is a spark.
Yeah.
That's very important to us.
Well, I would imagine maybe like I said earlier, I can really tell that you two have a change mindset. And it sounds like you seek out people who have a similar change mindset, whether it's for the business or person or and that having a change mindset is important to the culture and to rowing in the boat, right?
Yeah, exactly. And in terms of the recruitment process, it basically makes it a lot harder because because we're looking for people who are
excellent at their work.
Yeah, who are like really, really skilled and at what in a technical sense,
right?
But also like really care about what we're doing and are really kind of and care about like self-development as well. And finding people who have both of those things is exponentially harder than
I feel
finding people who just have one.
Yeah.
We also have a team coach who does one-on-ones, and we have team coaching sessions where we improve on how to give feedback to one another, how to effectively hold better meetings and all sorts. And it sort of feeds into somebody who's interested in personally growing, not just through work, but also personally get better at saying no or whatever that may be,
Right.
So that's one of the reasons I think the change mindset is so important, because once you're in, you will be challenged because everybody around you is challenging themselves, and they will be wondering, what's your growing edge? And they'll be wondering what's going on. So it's nice to have that. And we might have new ideas, you and me, Tom. And that's the hardest bit sometimes when Tom and I come and say, we want something new. What do you think? And the tumbleweed.
What did I create? Exactly. Oh my God.
So you want people to have a healthy debate in that room. And the more opinionated they are, the better in a way, because then you at least know what's going on in their heads. You don't want people to be quiet.
Yeah, conflict can be a good thing for change. Yeah. Sure. Well, this has been such an amazing conversation. I realized so this is like my first podcast interview here. You guys are thank you for being so gentle with me and so generous. I could keep talking forever, and I'm probably going too long here. People are probably going to tune out and go, God, I can't listen to that length. But this is such a wonderful conversation, and I really appreciate you going along with me. So I want to just two last questions to sort of bring this to land this plane. What's one thing that people could do to help create a more sustainable internet?
I would say we've built a carbon calculator, which you can for websites, which you can find at websitecarbon.com. So I'd say one thing is go there, test your own website and your competitors if you want.
Websitecarbon.com.
Exactly. And use it as a starting point to get thinking about this topic. Because once you're thinking about the topic, then you're on the journey to making improvements.
Cool. Yeah, I think the phrase that comes to mind is you can't improve what you can't measure. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And besides you two, who is someone we should follow or listen to learn more about this? Who do you listen to? Who's inspiring out there?
Tim from Mighty Bytes.
Definitely Tim Frick from Mighty Bytes.
Tim
over there in the US.
Okay. How do you spell his name?
Tim, Tim, and Frick. Tim Frick. And
Tim
he runs
Frick.
and he runs an agency called Mighty Bytes, which is sort of they're sort of Chicago centric. I think they're more distributed since the pandemic. But
okay. I will.
Very cool. They are very cool. I look at Tim as mother from another brother for Tom. They
Well,
bought.
I think Mighty Bites is like Wholegrain's kind of
Oh
US
man,
counterpart.
like
I
cousin
like
in the
Oh my
US.
God.
You know, it's like
mighty grain. Yes,
yeah, the Mighty
Nice.
Grain.
nice.
or whole grain bites.
Yeah.
Something. I think people are going to think we've been talking about cereal this whole time.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much. It's been such a great conversation, and I can't wait to follow up with you both again and talk more. So.
Yes, please keep in touch.
That would be great.
Yep. Thank you again so much. And again, their URL is wholegraindigital.com. Tom and Vineeta Greenwood, thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Bye. This has been an episode of For the Better. For more information, episodes, or to be a guest on the podcast, visit forthebetterpodcast.com. Thanks all. Be well.